I'm going to show you quickly just what I've created here. So I've got buttons on the bottom. These are the abilities. Oh, and then this is the kinetic burst. So it has quite a lot of damage, but you can see that it has a really long timer that you wanted. The next one, I'll get another enemy here. Okay, so next one, that's the laser. And again, the timer on that is faster, so you can use it a lot quicker than the other one, and use it again. To start off with, I want to change the buttons or the mapping. So we may have gone through this at the beginning, I'm not quite sure, I can't remember. We did it with another class, but I'm not sure if your class specifically did this. We're going to go to settings, project settings, input. This will modify the buttons. And what I want to do is add a couple of extra ones. So I need a button for each of these abilities. The mouse isn't going to cut it, so I'm going to, as well as add left mouse button, I'm going to add another one. So for me, what I'm going to put in is I'm going to use I'm going to use J, and then for the other buttons I'm going to use U, I, and O. And I'm going to create a new action. This one is going to be energy beam, or you can call it ability 1. Yeah, I'm just going to call it energy beam and spell it properly. This one I'm going to put as U, probably faster looking just in the keyboard. Energy beam is the first one. Kinetic burst then is the second one, and that one will be I. Third one, super mode, and that one will be O. So I have these abilities keyed to the keyboard now, and we can close that down now. We're going to be opening up a couple of different blueprints. We'll start with the energy beam. I'm only going to go through making the energy beam. I want you to try and do the other two yourself, and we'll go over that at the end. To start with the energy beam, we're going to go to blueprint class, actor. I'm going to call it energy beam, and I'm going to open it up. This is literally the same as our melee box. Which one's our melee box? Player melee box, that one there. We are going to add an object in, and we're also going to add some collision, and that's what's going to create the damage. Pretty much the same as this as well. We want it to destroy itself after probably maybe a little longer than that. We can test that out, and basically that's the same as well, so there's no real difference. What you could probably do is just duplicate this if you want to, but I'm just gonna go and create a new one, and I'll close that down. So I'm gonna create a cylinder. I'm gonna rotate that to the side. I'm gonna change this to 90 degrees. I'm gonna modify the scale of these now. So I'm going 0.5, 0.5, and 5 for the last one. Make it really long. The other thing you need to remember is always get rid of collision. No collision, because we don't want the players to get blocked by this. We want them to go through it. Next I'm going to click on the default scene route, and I'm going to create capsule collision, and I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees as well, and I'm just going to ramp that up. It's probably a good idea to kind of look at it from the top view, because then you can get a better idea of what it's going to look like. And I'm just going to go pretty much to the end of it there. right there, 250, that works. And go and make it slightly bigger, 25 say. I'll do. And I'll go back to perspective. So that's the visuals basically done. What you can do is that you can add a material here. If you want to change the material of this, go ahead. Let's see. That's fine there. That'll do. Then it's back to the event graph. So event begin play, delay, and after say 0.2 seconds, we want it to 0.3, we'll put it up a wee bit. Destroy actor. So it's going to destroy itself after 0.3 seconds. We want to create an event for our capsule. So whenever it overlaps, we want it to cause damage. We want it to cause damage to whatever enemies you have. So I have 2. So I'm going to cast it to enemy and enemy ranged. So it depends on how many you have. The other thing is we can only link this up to 1. So what I'm going to add here is a sequence. This will then let us do one after the other and link that in there. Then we need to apply damage. Apply damage, and damaged actor is enemy. And I need to create another one. And again, damaged actor is enemy ranged. Oops. Last thing here to do then is to create the variable for damage. So I'm going to create a new variable, call it damage, change it to a float. I'm going to hold control, and if I hold control and drag, it'll get it automatically. Holding alt will set it automatically without having the drop down happen for you. I'm just going to apply those. Compile, going to give damage a value. I'm going to put 150, that works for me. So that doesn't completely destroy them. It takes 4 hits for my players to kill an enemy. It does 50 damage each, and the enemies have 200 health. So that doesn't quite kill them. You still have to attack them once after that to destroy them. Because it's quite a fast cooldown, that I don't want to really give a lot of damage to it at the beginning. You can give more damage to like your kinetic burst or whatever. That's what I did. I put enough damage to kill them all at once in one kinetic burst because that has a longer cooldown. So that's our energy beam done. I'm going to compile and save, and I'm going to open up our player. I've put these in already. Basically do the same thing. You need to put in 3 variables. I call them each of your abilities. So energy beam cooldown, kinetic burst cooldown, super mode cooldown, and I've set them all to be 1. So make sure you hit compile after you rename them to let Unreal Engine know that it needs to actually compile it, and then you'll be able to change the value over here. So all of those are changed to 1. Next part then, again, I'm only going to do the first ability, but I'm going to just put the buttons out for all 3 of them. So the first one is energy beam, so that's our first event. Kinetic burst is our second, so you'll be doing this here, and super mode is our third. So you will have those 3 events to work with. Now the way that we want to work this is to check if the ability has actually reached its cooldown. But to start with, I just want to check if I can actually make the ability happen. So I'm just going to spawn actor from class, and it's going to be energy beam. The spawn transform, so we need to know where it's going to be spawned from. I'm going to use the arrow that we use for the melee attack, melee arrow. So I'm just going to drag that out. Get transform, get world transform. And I've just noticed that there's one step that we did wrong, which will be totally obvious whenever we playtest this. So hit play. Whenever I hit U, there's my ability and it's doing damage, but it is halfway through the enemy. But I can also press this as many times as I want. It doesn't have a cooldown yet. So I need to go back into my energy beam and I need to move these both forward. That is the center, so that's where it's going to spawn. So if we move these over to be like that there, they'll be fine now. And I'll just double check that again. Pressing U, yeah, that's much better. That works. Okay, so next part is to create the ability to only have it apply once per 10 seconds or so. First thing that we need to do is check if it's actually if the ability has actually cooled down. So I'm going to move these over slightly. You start that with a branch. So a branch is always a question. Has something happened? Do you want something to work? That kind of thing. So we want to check energy beam cooldown. We want to get it and we want to check, is it greater than or equal to a value, and we want it to be equal to 1. So the energy cooldown is going to go from 0 to 1 in the cooldown process. Whenever it hits 1, that's when we want the ability to be alive again for us to be able to use it. So if it's underneath 1, we don't want to be able to use this ability. The next part is to set up the actual timer. We're going to do this using a couple, well, one more branch. We're going to use one more. I'm going to put another branch in. What we are checking is if the value hits a certain number, basically. So we are going to drag this out again. And we are going to put in the less than. So if this value is less than 1, we want it to activate. So we want the timer to start doing something. And what we want to do is start setting our value. And all we're going to do here is drag this out, and I'm going to put a plus sign. So float plus float. And I'm going to link that up here. And I'm just going to finish this off, and then we'll talk about what we need this value to be. And there's another value here as well. Now, this is the part that gets kind of complex, and I've just kind of roughed it out. There is mathematics to this, but I was too lazy to work it out. So I'm going to change this to 0.1. This value here is going to be how many times a second it's going to update our little progress bar. So if you remember our health bar, it's going to update that every 0.1 of a second. This then is how much it's going to add per 0.1 of a second. So I am going to put this to 0.01 to start with, and that will give us a pretty good cooldown. I think that's 10 seconds, but I didn't double check. I'm just going kind of roughing it. The last part then is, once that's done that, it's going to stop. So we need to redo that So we're going to drag out here. I like using these things here. So if you scroll down, if you drop it and scroll down, add reroute node, and then I'm going to add another one over here. It just makes it a little bit cleaner, and then you can link that like that. Okay, why is it gone all weird? Okay, alright, do it the other way then. This is the more awkward way, but it seems to be the only way that works then. Go ahead, drag it over, double click. No, just select this here and do that. So what's happening is it's going to add 0.01 every 0.1 second, and then it's going to go back here, check if it's 1 or less than 1, and then it's going to go through this process again and add 0.01 in 0.1 of a second. So it's going to keep repeating until it hits 1 or above. Now we won't be able to actually see this work on the screen yet. It's not going to be visible, but we can press, well, basically spam the button. Alright, so something's wrong. We have done something that shouldn't work. Okay, so what I have done is I've forgotten to change this value, so it's never going down below 1. So we need to bring this in between here. And we need to set that to 0. So after we apply the ability, we need to set it to 0, so then it will cool down, but it will also not allow us to activate it again. So I'm just gonna click that again and just retry that. So click it once and we cannot press it again. And I'm just gonna keep spamming until we get the ability again. Should be pretty soon. There we go. Okay, so that is the system setup. So it is basically the same for this one here. You copy the exact same thing. You're going to create, well, it depends on the shape. This is the shape I created for it. Again, it's exactly the same as the energy beam. Put it to the side. It's just a disc or a sphere. You can have it whatever size you want. I was just guessing. And apply a certain amount of damage. So I put 300 there. The event graph is exactly the same as what we had before. That goes in this system. You add it to this delay, but what you're going to do is make that number even smaller. Sorry, not that one. Make this one, well, make this one bigger. You don't need to make this one smaller because that's getting a bit too awkward. You make this one bigger. So say half a second or something instead of 0.1. So it's 0.5 down here instead. But it's that exact same loop that you use underneath here. You still use the spawn actor, but you're going to spawn your kinetic burst instead. And it's the same system here, but except you're using the kinetic burst cooldown instead. The last part then is to apply it to the HUD. So I'm going to close that down. Going to go into our HUD. I'm not going to create these again either. I'll show you how to make them, but I'll just reuse these ones that I've made already. All you need to do is drag a progress bar in, and I put these to size X is 100 and size Y is also 100, and that's pretty much all I did. The other thing to modify it, you need to change it from being left to right. I'll just show you here. I'll put the value in. So at the moment it's left to right. I want it to be bottom to top. That will now mean that whenever I, come on, get out of it. There we go. Add the percentage, it's going to increase in the bar. So that's how I created that. I'm just going to apply it to this one here. These three I have named, so I've called this one energy beam bar. The next one is kinetic burst bar, and then last one is super mode bar. So make sure you name those to make it easier to navigate which one you're working with. I've also changed the color of these. So I've changed this one to blue, that one to yellow, and the last one to like magenta. Last part is to do it exactly the same as we did for the health bar. We're going to bind an event to it, create a binding. I'm going to move this over. Our variables are in our player, so we need to go and get it. So get player character up here and cast to player 1. We want to get the energy beam cooldown, and we want to link it up here. And that is pretty much all we have to do. That's it set up. That's exactly the same that you would do for the other ones. So exactly the same for this percent, but you're getting the kinetic burst ability here, and this one will be your super mode ability variable there. And I compile and save those. Gonna play. The bar is now full. Whenever I go to use it now though, then it's going to get used and it's going to get a cooldown. And we have to now wait until the cooldown is over, whenever it is full, and then we can use it again. And that's how it's done. Now the last one, so the super mode that you want to apply, basically the same as these two ability drops that we created before. All you're doing is modifying parts of the character. So there's my boost speed ability. I'm just telling it to go to player 1, cast boost speed ability, and then destroy itself. And if I go to player 1 now, there is my boost speed ability. This was made on a PowerPoint, so you should have the PowerPoint. I believe it's up on Blackboard as well. If it's not, give me a shout. So there it is, changing the material, changing the max walk speed, giving a delay, and then setting it back to what it is by default. And then there's our boost damage. Change the material, increase the melee damage, so I've got melee damage here. Give it a delay for how long you want it to last, and then set it back to normal whenever you want it to finish. That is exactly the same if you want to do it for anything else. If you want to increase the damage of these energy beams as well, you will have to modify the variables within the abilities. So what you might potentially do is add the damage in here instead. So you might have energy beam damage, kinetic burst damage, you know, you might have them in here, and then you might cast them over to these abilities. So what you would do here instead of damage would be getting it from the player, but it's up to you. See what you can get done, have a go at creating those, see how far you can get, and then get back to me.